Dear listeners, I ask you to listen to the story until the very end and be sure to write a review about what you liked and what needs to be changed to make it more interesting for you to listen to my stories.
Cold room. We had just moved into the apartment a few weeks ago, and I should have known there was something off the moment I stepped in. But when you're desperate, like we were, you don't question things. The place seemed perfect, old, but with character. The rent was cheap for the area, and we were eager to settle in, forget the past, and start fresh. Still, there was always something about this place. Something in the air. Something in the way the walls creaked at night, the floors groaned underfoot, like the apartment was alive. But it was the room, that truly unnerved me. It wasn't immediately obvious. At first, I figured it was just the weather. Cold winters and all that. But after a few days, I started to realize that it didn't matter how high I turned the thermostat or how thick the blankets were. The room, the one we had designated as the spare bedroom, stayed cold. The temperature there didn't shift, no matter what. If we left the window open or shut, it didn't change. And at night? It was like ice, suffocating and sharp, the air biting through every layer of clothing, through my skin. My girlfriend, Sarah, didn't seem too bothered by it at first. She said it was probably an old heating issue. "We'll get someone to look at it later," she shrugged, wrapping herself in a thick sweater. But that wasn't it. Something about the cold, the unnatural cold, made me feel uneasy. It wasn't right. And I had to find out why. It was late one evening when I decided to investigate. Sarah was in the kitchen, making us dinner, and I slipped into the room with the intention of checking the ventilation. Maybe it was some blocked duct, some dust-filled vent causing the chill. But when I got in there, I felt it again, that heaviness in the air, like the room was waiting, like it was holding its breath. The room was small, not much more than a storage space really. The bed was still unmade, half-empty boxes stacked in the corner. I ran my hand over the radiator, cold, like everything else in here. But something else caught my eye. The wall, the one behind the dresser, seemed a little strange. The paint was chipped, and there was something off about the texture. I pushed the dresser aside, curiosity gnawing at me. And there it was, a narrow, almost hidden seam in the wall. My heart skipped a beat. A door? No. Not exactly. It was more like an old door frame, sealed over, the edges rough and uneven. The plaster had been smeared over it carelessly, covering it entirely. But the outline was there. I reached out, hesitating. What the hell was this? Why had they sealed up a doorway? Who would do that? And why? I ran my fingers along the edges, feeling the dried plaster crumble beneath my touch. The air grew colder. I could feel my breath fogging in front of me, even though the rest of the apartment was warm. I froze. From the other side of the wall, barely audible, I heard something. A sound. A whimper, soft and fragile, like someone was crying. But it wasn't just crying. No, it was something more desperate. A sound of sorrow, of something trapped. And I swear, I felt it then, the unmistakable weight of something alive behind that wall, something breathing, something waiting. I pulled my hand back, my heart hammering in my chest. I stood there for a long moment, my breath shallow, staring at the wall. Was it a trick of the mind? Was it just the cold, messing with me? I needed to get a grip. But then Sarah called from the kitchen, breaking my trance. "What's taking you so long?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I was still staring at that seam, frozen in place. "Just checking the vents," I managed, my voice shaky. I forced myself to turn away. But even as I left the room, the sound followed me. That faint, persistent crying, so quiet I thought I might have imagined it. But I hadn't. It was real. I told myself I was overreacting. It was just an old apartment, full of creaks and groans. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And I couldn't help but wonder what, or who, was behind that wall. The next day, we planned to check it out. I didn't want to tell Sarah what I had heard. She'd think I was losing my mind. But as we stood in the room together, I couldn't ignore the look on her face. She felt it too, that chill in the air, the strange energy hanging around. She was already on edge. Maybe we should check the wall? I suggested, though I didn't know what I was hoping to find. Sarah gave me a long look, hesitating. You don't think it's just old pipes or something, do you? I could hear her doubt, but I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Something was here. Something was hiding behind that wall, and I needed to know what it was. Let's check it, she said, finally. And just like that, we set to work. Little did we know, by the time we were done, we'd be face to face with something that would change everything. Something we weren't ready for. Something that no one could ever prepare for. But that's a story for later. For now, just know this, when we started breaking down that wall, it wasn't just cold in that room anymore. The air shifted. Something was waking up. The next few days were a blur, a strange mix of dread and determination. I could feel Sarah growing more distant, though she tried to mask it with little distractions. The cold room had a way of seeping into our minds, into the space between us. We spent hours in there, chipping away at the plaster. Every little scrape of the chisel against the wall felt like an intrusion, like we were disturbing something that had been undisturbed for far too long. The air thickened with each piece of the wall we removed. I couldn't stop thinking about the sound I had heard, that whimpering cry, like someone calling for help from the other side. And yet, there was no real sense of urgency between us, no rush to finish. It was as if the room had a strange pull, as if it knew we needed to uncover whatever lay behind that sealed-up doorway, but it also knew we weren't truly ready for what we'd find. By the time we had cleared enough of the plaster to see the frame clearly, something else had changed. The temperature had dropped, as if the room was sucking the warmth out of the air. I watched Sarah shiver, though she was bundled up in layers. The pale, thin light of the late afternoon filtered through the window, casting long shadows across the room, but it didn't seem to warm anything. There was something unnatural about it, something about the way the light flickered as if the room itself was fighting against it. I reached out to touch the exposed doorframe, my fingers grazing the rough wood. It was then that I heard it again. The crying. This time, it was louder. More urgent. A steady, rhythmic sobbing. But it wasn't a voice, not really. It was more of a vibration in the air. I couldn't tell if it was coming from the walls or if it was inside my head. But it was there, filling the space. My heart thudded in my chest, but I didn't want to acknowledge it. I couldn't. If I admitted it was real, if I gave in to the idea that something was behind that door, then it would all become too real. Sarah looked up at me, her eyes wide, her lips slightly parted. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, barely audible, as if speaking too loud might make it worse. I nodded, but no words came out. I didn't need to say anything. We both felt it. The thing on the other side of the wall was real. And now, it was waiting. "Maybe we should just leave it," Sarah said, her voice tight. She was visibly shaken. I could see her trembling, but it wasn't just from the cold. It was from fear. She didn't want to believe it either. Neither of us did. But the more we ignored it, the more it felt like the room was closing in on us. I shook my head. "We're too far in now. We have to find out what's in there." She bit her lip, clearly torn, but nodded. And together, we pressed on. The final pieces of plaster came away with a loud crack, and for a moment, I thought I might be seeing things. But no. The space behind the wall was real. There, just inches away from us, was a narrow opening. The darkness inside was thick and suffocating, deeper than I could have imagined. It felt like the room had been holding its breath for years, waiting for us to open it. I grabbed the flashlight from my pocket, flicked it on, and aimed it into the dark void. Nothing. Just black. A pit. But then, a sound. A shuffle. Barely noticeable at first, but growing louder. It was like something moving, scraping along the floor, a sound that made my skin crawl. Then came the whisper. It was faint, like a voice just on the edge of hearing, but unmistakable. "Please." I froze. My throat tightened, my body rigid. There was someone in there. Someone, or something. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of whatever lay beyond that doorframe. I turned to Sarah, but she was already backing away, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. "We need to leave now," she whispered, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away from that hole in the wall. The thing inside was still there, and it wanted to be found. I stepped forward, driven by some instinct I couldn't explain, and reached my hand toward the opening. The temperature dropped further, the cold now like ice on my fingertips. My breath was visible, my heart pounding in my chest, but still, I couldn't stop myself. I wanted to see. And as I did, a gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the flashlight. The darkness swallowed us whole. I stumbled back, heart racing, my breathing shallow. Something moved in the dark, something close. A brush against my leg. Something cold, wet. "God, get out!" Sarah screamed, and I barely heard her, barely had the strength to react before I felt the pressure of something pulling at me. But just as I was about to reach for the door, the room shifted again. The walls groaned as if they were alive. The floor trembled beneath my feet, and then, suddenly, everything stopped. A silence so deep, it was suffocating. I don't know how much time passed. Seconds? Minutes? Hours? All I know is when I opened my eyes, the hole in the wall was gone. The plaster had sealed itself back up. No trace of the opening remained. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at me, her face pale, her mouth slightly agape, and in her eyes, I saw the same terror I felt. We didn't speak for a long time. We didn't need to. We both knew. Whatever we had uncovered wasn't just a room. It wasn't just a mistake in the apartment's design. It was something older. Something that had been waiting. Watching. The crying hadn't stopped. It was still there. And it would never let us forget. Later that night, when I lay in bed, I could still hear it, distant, faint, but unmistakable. The whispers. The sobbing. The sound of someone or something trapped, calling out for help from behind the walls. But I never checked again. Neither of us did. And that was when I realized, sometimes, some things are better left unseen. Because what we found wasn't a room. It was a prison. A place where something had been buried, forgotten, and now it was awake. It was waiting for us to open the door. But we didn't open it. Did we? Or did we? We didn't speak much after that night. The apartment, once a dream of new beginnings, now felt like a tomb. Sarah stayed in her own corner of the room, eyes wide and restless, her thoughts drifting. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing in from every side, suffocating us. The strange cold still lingered, though not as sharply. But it was there, like a thin veil across everything, a constant reminder of the thing behind the wall. I tried to shake the feeling, tried to push it down deep, but it clung to me. In the mornings, when I opened the windows to let in the light, I half expected the wall to crack open again, to let whatever had been trapped inside crawl out and claim us. And when the night came, the whispers would start. Not loud, not clear, just soft, like a breath against my ear, a murmur I couldn't fully understand. The worst part? The cold seemed to follow me. It wasn't just in that room anymore. It was in the hallway, in the kitchen, even in our bed at night. At first, I told myself it was just the weather, that maybe the heating system was faulty, but I knew better. The air was wrong. It had the same weight as the room. The same oppression. Sarah couldn't take it anymore. Her eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, her hands shaking when she reached for anything. I knew she was afraid, and that fear was contagious. The once steady rhythm of our life had been shattered. "I can't stay here," she said one morning, her voice barely above a whisper. She sat on the edge of the bed, her legs pulled up to her chest. "I feel it, too. Something's here. Something's wrong. I didn't argue. I knew she was right. But we didn't have anywhere else to go. We were trapped in the apartment, trapped by the cold, trapped by whatever had been buried behind that wall. That afternoon, we decided to leave. The plan was simple: pack our things, walk out, and never look back. I knew we wouldn't return to that place, not after everything that had happened. The walls, the whispers, the cold, it was too much to bear. But as I gathered our things, I realized something strange. The apartment was quieter than before. Too quiet. The whispers had stopped. The cold was still there, but it wasn't as intense. It was almost like the room was waiting for us to leave, to give us one final moment of peace before it claimed what it wanted. We packed up our bags, our few belongings, and carried them down the stairs. As we left the building, I glanced back, a heavy feeling in my chest. The front door of the building was shut behind us, the window of our apartment dark. But that's when I heard it. The sound of the door. The door that we had sealed behind us. It creaked open, slowly, as if something were stepping out. I stopped, frozen in place. Sarah didn't hear it, or maybe she was pretending not to. She kept walking, her eyes fixed ahead, as if determined to escape without looking back. But I couldn't. I couldn't move. My heart hammered in my chest, and my breath caught in my throat. And then I saw it, just for a second, a fleeting glimpse. A figure, standing in the window of the apartment, watching us leave. Its face was obscured by shadows, but I could see the outline, the shape, and the faint glimmer of something moving behind it. I couldn't tell if it was a person or something else entirely. But the moment I looked away, it was gone. Just like that. As if the window had never been there. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. But when I turned to look at Sarah, she was already too far ahead, her pace quickening. I turned back to the building. The door had closed. There was nothing there. We left the city that afternoon. We didn't look back. But I knew it wasn't over. Whatever we had found behind that wall, it wasn't finished with us. It was still waiting. And as I lay awake that night, in a new town, in a new bed, I could still hear it, the faint sobbing, the whispers that seemed to follow us. The cold, curling around me like an invisible hand, reaching out from the shadows. It was far away now, but I knew it wouldn't stay away forever. And maybe, in some twisted way, I didn't want it to. Because that cold room, that thing behind the wall, it had become a part of me. It had found a home inside my soul. And no matter how far I ran, it would always be there, waiting. Days passed since we left the apartment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly over. Every corner I turned, I half expected to hear the faint sound of that creaking door. Every darkened room, I thought I could feel its presence, like something was just on the edge of my vision. Sarah didn't speak about it much, but I saw the way she jumped at the smallest noise, the way she would check behind her when we walked into a new place, as if she were still being followed. We stayed in a motel on the outskirts of town, a place that smelled of stale air and cheap cleaning supplies. It wasn't much, but it was quiet. No whispers. No cold. But then came the nights when the darkness felt too heavy. I could feel it press against me, suffocating, crawling under my skin. At first, I told myself it was just paranoia, but there were moments, too many moments, when I was sure it was real. That thing, whatever it was still there. I kept having dreams about the apartment. The cold room. The wall. The whispers. But this time, the dreams weren't just dreams. They felt like memories. Real, vivid memories, as if I were still trapped in that place, staring at that sealed door. In the dreams, the whispers grew louder. They would pull me toward the wall, urging me to listen. I could almost feel the rough texture of the brick beneath my fingers, smell the dampness of the air as if it were coming from inside me. And then, one night, something changed. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. My body was tense, every muscle locked in place, but I couldn't move. The air around me was thick, heavy, suffocating. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to move, but my body refused to obey. The room was darker than it should have been, the shadows stretching in unnatural ways. The cold, it was back. I turned my head slowly, eyes searching the room, but I couldn't see anything, not at first. Then, in the corner of the room, near the window, I saw it. A shadow, darker than the darkness around it, moving. It was the shape of a person, no, not quite a person, but something close to it. I wanted to look away, to turn back to the safety of the bed, but I couldn't. It felt like I was bound, held by invisible chains. The shadow began to grow, stretching and shifting, and then it stepped forward, closer to me. I could hear it now, the whispers, louder this time, like voices from another world, urging me to listen, to understand. The temperature in the room dropped even more, the air thick with an unnatural cold that froze my bones. I wanted to move, to scream, but nothing came out. My breath was shallow, ragged, and the room seemed to close in on me, smaller, tighter, until I couldn't breathe. And then, the whispers stopped. Dead silence. I waited, still paralyzed, still unable to move, my heart hammering in my chest. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was waiting. Waiting for something. Waiting for me. Finally, I managed to break free. My legs moved, shaky at first, but then I bolted from the bed, stumbling to the door. My fingers fumbled with the handle, but when I threw it open, the hallway outside was empty, just as I'd left it. No one was there. No shadows, no cold, just the hum of the motel's fluorescent lights. But I didn't feel safe. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in that room, whatever had been chasing me, was still watching, waiting. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't rest. I couldn't trust the silence. And then came the call. It was late in the afternoon, the sun low in the sky, casting long shadows across the motel parking lot. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an unknown number, the area code unfamiliar. I hesitated, then answered, the voice on the other end barely a whisper. "It's not over." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hands trembling. I knew that voice. I couldn't place it, but I knew it. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The coldness crept back in. That same, heavy cold I had felt in the apartment. The same whispers. The same thing. "Sarah," I called, my voice tight. She came into the room, her eyes wide with concern, but I couldn't explain it to her. I didn't know how. I didn't know where it was coming from or how it had found me. But I knew one thing, it wasn't finished. We didn't stay in the motel after that. We left again, drove through the night without speaking much, just trying to outrun whatever was chasing us. But no matter where we went, no matter how many miles we put between us and that damn apartment, the cold followed. The whispers followed. That thing behind the wall followed. And that's when I realized. There was no escape. The room, the shadow, the cold, they were a part of us now. A part of me. The thing behind the wall wasn't just in the apartment anymore. It was in me. In my bones. And no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, it would always be there, waiting. The whispers grew louder. The cold grew sharper. But I couldn't stop running. Not yet. Not until I knew what it wanted. And maybe, just maybe, if I could figure that out, maybe then I could finally escape. But for now, all I had was the sound of my own breathing and the darkness that stretched out ahead of me. And I knew, deep down, that I wasn't alone. The days after that call blurred together. I couldn't tell if we were running towards something or away from it. Every town, every motel, felt the same, lifeless, full of quiet desperation, as if they were just waiting for something to happen, something bad. The cold followed us wherever we went, creeping into our bones, lingering in the corners of every room. It wasn't the chill of a draft or a faulty air conditioner. It was something deeper, something that clung to us. I could feel it now, even in the middle of the day, when the sun should have warmed the world around us. But the sun was only a faint memory, something that couldn't touch the darkness. We drove through empty highways, stopped at roadside diners where the food had no taste, the people were distant, their eyes hollow. And the whispers, God, the whispers were getting louder. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear them, curling through my thoughts like smoke. It's not over. That was all they ever said. But what did that mean? It was late one evening, in another small town, when Sarah broke. We were in a cheap hotel room, our luggage scattered across the floor, the smell of stale carpet hanging in the air. The window was cracked open just enough to let in the faintest breeze, but the air still felt too thick. Sarah was sitting by the bed, staring at the wall like it had been calling to her, like it knew something she didn't. I could see the strain in her face, the way her hands trembled. "It's here," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking louder might make it real. I froze. "What do you mean, it's here?" She slowly turned to face me, her eyes hollow, dark circles beneath them. "I think it's always been here," she said. "From the moment we walked into that place. It's been following us. It's in the walls, in the air, and now it's in us." Her voice cracked, as if the words were suffocating her, trying to claw their way out. I took a step forward, my own anxiety spiking, my heart racing. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes locked onto mine, her lips parted as if she were about to say something, but she couldn't. Instead, she clutched her chest, gasping for air. A noise, deep and guttural, slipped from her throat, a sound that wasn't her own. It made the hairs on my arms stand up, a visceral chill running through me. She collapsed onto the floor, writhing, her fingers digging into the carpet as if she were trying to claw her way out of her own skin. I rushed to her, but when my hands touched her, I felt it. The cold. The unbearable cold, coursing through her. It was like an electric shock, seizing my muscles. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing heavier, thicker, as if the walls themselves were closing in on us. "Sarah!" I shouted, shaking her, but she didn't respond. Her eyes were wide, but empty, like there was no one home. The whispers, those maddening whispers, were so loud now, ringing in my ears, and I couldn't make them stop. I looked around the room, searching for something, anything, that could explain this. And then, for the briefest moment, I saw it, just a flicker in the corner of my eye. The shadow. The same one that had followed me from that room. It stood there, tall and still, just beyond the edge of the bed, its shape blending with the darkness. It wasn't like a person, not really. It was more. It was like a void that could consume everything, if you let it. I stepped back, my chest tight with panic, the room spinning. My hands were slick with sweat as I pulled Sarah up, but her body was limp, unresponsive. She didn't feel like herself anymore. And then I heard it, the sound of the door, creaking open, as if something was stepping inside. My breath caught in my throat, and I turned, terrified, to see the room darkening even more, the shadows growing longer. Something was coming. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was Sarah, if it was me, or if it was something that had followed us all this way. But I knew one thing, there was no escape now. Whatever we had done to awaken it, whatever we had stirred behind that wall in that cold room, it had followed us. And it wasn't done yet. I rushed to the window, tearing it open, the cold air rushing in as the whispers reached a fever pitch. I had to get out. We had to get out. But Sarah's eyes met mine, empty, unblinking, as if she was lost in some other world. She couldn't hear me. Couldn't see me. She was already gone. I grabbed my jacket, and I ran. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to run. The cold was unbearable, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't go back. Behind me, I could hear the room shifting, cracking, as if it was alive. I felt something, some presence, following me, always just out of reach, but close enough that I could feel its breath on my neck. I couldn't look back. I don't know how long I ran. Maybe hours, maybe days. Time blurred. But in the end, it didn't matter. Because, deep down, I knew one thing for certain, it wasn't over. It was never over. Whatever was behind that wall, whatever had been waiting in that cold room, had marked us. And there was no place left to hide. The cold was inside me now,